Hey guys, thanks for watching. Today we got something a little bit different, which I'm hoping is going to be something a little bit more regular. We're doing an interview today. So we're going to be actually interviewing Bree Barton. She is an author, speaker, dancer, podcaster, mental health advocate, and she-wolf. She wrote her first book as a humble child of 10, her exact words in the query letter she sent to editors. Those editors told her to keep writing, and luckily she did. A handful of years later, Bree is the author of Zia Erases the World, her best-selling middle grade debut. She teaches dance and writing, often at the same time, like at Rock and Write, the free empowering movement workshop she created for girls and young women. Bree's books have been published in 9 countries in 6 languages, 5 of which she does not speak. It was interesting. Bree actually reached out to me, wrote a letter, which was really touching and really poignant. Almost got a tear out of my cold, dark soul. So I was like, hey, let's connect, let's talk a little bit, and we had a wonderful conversation. So here's a little video sample of that. All right, so we're starting to do like an interview series up on this YouTube channel. We're here with Bree Barton. She's an author of a book called that's coming out or has come out yet, or it's what or is
Come out, yeah, April
coming
26th. Been
April
out almost exactly a month to the
1 month.
day.
So it's called Zia Erases the World. I have a copy over here, a personally signed copy. So I was very excited. And I got a personalized card. So I was like, with some vulgarity and everything like that. So we're all
You know you like it.
the style. We got the style here, right? However, I'm a very terrible interviewer, right? Because I'm a person, I still have not been able to read the book. It's on my agenda, but of course, like we were talking a little bit before, my life has been upside down here and there. So we're gonna read it.
Well, we will. It's good. That's actually good because I mean, I'll keep the spoilers at a minimum.
Fantastic. All right. So Bree, tell me a little bit about yourself and how we became an author and your book.
So I always wanted to be an author. I started writing when I was in 3rd grade. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Munninger, remember that name because you might see it in the book. She would have us write stories just on notebook paper and then bind them with like cardboard to make little book objects. And I loved it. I was so hooked. Like, I want to do this. So, I kept writing stories. I wrote my first book when I was 10, about my experience that year. My mom was a single mom and she had gotten pregnant with my brother. This is when I was 10. And a lot of people in our community didn't like that she was a single mom with not 2 kids, right? I'm from Texas. And so we were asked to leave the community in a lot of ways. She lost her job.
Wow.
And just, yeah, a lot of stuff, a lot of chaos. We were moving a lot. We moved almost every year. So I wrote about it. The book I was writing became this way to kind of process what I was going through, and including the fear and the uncertainty, but also the joy. I mean, I was in the room when my brother was born, right? Like, really some
Oh
pretty
wow. Yeah.
at age 10. The nurses were all like, she's too young. And I was like, I love this. So people thought I was going to be a doctor. It turns out I went the writer path, slightly less money. But yeah, I just used books. I used writing to process, right? To sort of figure out what I felt and thought about things. And I did submit that manuscript. I was 10. I felt like I was ready to a published book. And I got a lot of no's. All the editors said no, but they said, keep reading, keep writing, right? And so I did. And I kept writing. I put it aside for a while. As a teenager, I was more like a theater kid. And then I came back to it in my 20s and have a fantasy trilogy. So my first 3 books published. So this is
Oh
my
wow.
first
Nice.
for a younger audience. And it's really the first time. I mean, the trilogy also dips into mental health and mental illness just because it's been very big in my life and my family history. It's something I think about a lot. So there's certainly explorations of particularly depression in the trilogy, but this book is so much of my story. It's I pulled from my own experience with depression in 6th grade, my first major episode, how scary it was. And people weren't talking about it as much then, right? There weren't TikTokers like you. There wasn't kind of a better awareness around mental health. If you had asked me what mental health was at 11, I would have had no idea, right? So
Yeah.
I took that story and then, put it into a fictional story and created a character around it. But there's so much of me and my middle school experience in this book.
Awesome. So I'm very much excited to read it. I know like one of the things I'm like, is child adolescent psychiatrist, and I work with kiddos and
Mhm.
teens and early teens and later teens up until they get to like out of high school and graduating off to college. And then sometimes they'll go to my adult clinic, but we get them through those times. But 80+% of my time is working with children and adolescents. And you're right. So even though we'll go looking back on my life, I can't remember there ever being like a topic or a discussion of like mental health.
Right.
And nobody talked about it. There was no awareness about it. I have no idea if any of my classmates had anything going on at all. So, and looking back, like even I think in high school, we had like one kid who like disappeared for like, a couple weeks and he looked different when he came back. And like in retrospect, right, I can look back and be like, oh, probably something happened, right?
Yeah.
Probably there was something that happened. And, there were all these rumors that were out there. And it's just kind of this whole unspoken thing when we're at that age. But again, look, we're shifting now and we're seeing so much conversation about it. So I'm glad about it. And now we're writing books and stuff and we're getting more and more out there. So
Well, and people like you are helping so much, right? Something like your TikTok, it's like, obviously there's still stigma, right? I'm not saying that like there's no stigma around mental health or mental illness, but people like you are affecting that change because it's like, oh, it can be funny, right? We can actually, it's not this like whatever we think of a psychiatrist, right, in the media or whatever, this horrible dark thing. Like there's also humor, right, and laughter that can be found, and that's a big part of the book for me too. It's like, oh, it's an issues book, it's about depression, but it's also really funny. I mean, you tell me. But I feel like there are a lot of jokes in it. I wanted to balance out the darkness with the light. And I do think it's so interesting when I do, I speak at a lot of schools, both virtually and then in person is coming back. And that's been really the best part of the last month, is getting to meet a lot of kids and young people. But I usually ask, as a part of my slideshow, when I talk about my depression in sixth grade, I often ask for a show of hands if they're familiar with terms like mental health, depression, anxiety, and a lot of hands go up, right? And that was just not the way it was when I was in sixth grade. Now we know, right, that other kids were going through stuff, but nobody was talking about it. I wasn't talking about it. So I felt really broken, right? I felt like I was the only one feeling these things. What was so wrong with me that I had this, I describe it like a room of shadows in my chest. And that's in the book as well. Zia calls it the shadoom, for the room of shadows. So I just felt so flawed. I felt so wrong, I felt so wrong. And I think a lot of kids do still feel that today, even if there is more conversation around it. But it is interesting to sort of watch, just watch the shift toward more openness, more awareness, less stigma around mental health. And that's so much of the book is Zia being afraid to speak the things she's feeling. She doesn't know the word. She doesn't know the word depression. The word depression doesn't appear in the book until quite late. And the whole dictionary conceit, right, is she has this magical dictionary. She's trying to erase these feelings inside her, but she doesn't know the word depression. And shadoom is a made up word. It's not in the dictionary. So she's trying to sort of, approach fear and pain and sadness as things that she wants to be erased. And obviously things go different than she intended. But one of that's no spoiler, but one of the what she discovers at her middle school is that the kind of least likely candidate, the one she thinks is so together and so polished, is also dealing with mental illness of a sort of different sort. And that once, of course, my whole hope, right, is that it's not by hiding the stuff and erasing the feelings, it's by talking about them and finding people who it's safe to talk to about it, like you, for example, right? Like that's what I hope kids will get out of this, that actually it is by finding the words that you can get help and that you can make it through, right?
yeah, and when again, kind of like in my work, when I'm the psychiatrist for our partial hospitalization program
Mm.
in the area. So which a lot of that work is like in a group model. And the number one thing that I hear, when we go through the program, the kids are in the program or the teens are in the program for 2 to 3 weeks, and I always ask them on the last day, like, what's your main takeaway? What is the thing that you got out of your time over here? And hopefully it was a positive experience for them. Um, but overwhelmingly, the number one kind of feedback we get, or the number one thing that I hear from them, is that I felt like I was alone before. I
Mhm.
felt like there was nobody else who was going through this. Now I'm in a group of people, 6, 12, however many people that are in the group, and I know that I'm not alone. I know
Mhm.
that other people are going through this. So that, like, I think is a huge thing, right? Again, like what you're describing is putting it out into the light, putting it out there so that people can have the conversation, understand that people are going through something.
Yeah.
Everybody's going through something or other.
Yeah, exactly. I talk about that in my school visits too. I talk about group therapy and how helpful it was to me because, it doesn't mean everyone else is going through depression, right? Like I was, but they're all going through something, right? Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's grief, maybe they've lost a pet or a grandparent or a parent, right, in COVID, or they've moved to a new place and they have no friends. There's so many things that people are going through. And I think it's so when you can be in a supported, safe space, right? Certainly helps to have a professional who can create that space. I'm always like worried that people be like, I'm gonna like tell a world about and then they go on an internet forum, right? And it's like horrible. But when you can find a safe, supportive space, right? Right, people like you create them, then right, you're able to connect with these other people going through their stuff. And so you feel seen and you feel validated. You're like, oh, I'm not broken, right? I'm not like the weirdest, most messed up person in this middle school or whatever. All these other people are going through their stuff too.
You talked about, going on the internet and coming across people who think they know what they're talking about, right? It was one of the things when you had reached out initially to me, and I got the message, and you had talked about your experience with the life coach, right? Always the life coaches and the people again who are selling something, and it's one of the things that I've spoken out across, right, or spoken out against is people who market themselves as mental health professionals
Mhm.
who are not mental health professionals, right? Um, Talk to me about, and you had an experience with it that kind of, and again, as you're comfortable and as much details as you want to or don't want to, tell me a little bit about that in your life.
Yeah, and my therapist calls them the love and lighters, which we refer often to the love and lighters in our sessions. I mean, the love and lighters are so dangerous and harmful because, well, let's go back. Okay, so I was raised fundamentalist, right? Super conservative Christianity. And depression in that context is, well, you're not praying enough. You know what I mean? Like, well, if you just prayed more. And so then in addition to feeling like you want to die, you're also being told that it's your fault, right? That you're not doing something right. And if you just prayed more, if you just let God into your life more, then you would be better. So you have a double, I feel like hell, I want to die. Oh, and it's my fault. And what's so interesting is when I left conservative Christianity, I moved out of Texas, ended up in LA for many years, did yoga teacher training, got into yoga, felt that really was helpful to have that kind of movement. And these days I don't do much yoga. I do more kind of dancing around my house. But anyway, I found a lot of solace and good stuff in yoga. And so I did yoga teacher training. And it was so interesting because it was the same, it was different dogma, but it was still dogma. It was like, well, if you're eating nightshades, that's probably why you're depressed, right? Or my best friend who was finally, after years, diagnosed with PTSD. She's a yoga teacher as well. For years, she went with people saying, well, you're not meditating enough. You need to meditate. And yeah, you are doing nightshades. That's probably the issue. So the same shit, right? Oh, it's your fault. You wake up every day with a block of fire in your chest and you want to die. You think about throwing yourself in front of a subway in DC, but it actually is your fault because you're not doing this or this or that, or right, living in abundance. Don't get me started on living in abundance. Even that, there's a brief line about that in the book. So yeah, it was so weird to realize that these two vastly different, or they seem vastly different, right? The sort of like conservative Christian track, the yoga people track, although isn't it interesting, they're both tend to be anti-vaxxers, but that like both of these are founded in dogma, this sense of like blaming you for this thing that you're going through. And I hated that. And the life coach that I got tangled up with last year, yeah, I mean, her sort of whole thing was like, well, whatever you say, whatever you put into the universe will adapt to meet it. So if you say, I'm not depressed, the universe will change itself and the molecules will move around and you won't be depressed anymore. And I have to say, I mean, I feel like a fool, but I went a few months last year thinking, okay, well, maybe like, is it just that I think about, I really identify with depression. I talk about being depressed. I talk about mental health. Is that it? Am I focusing too much on that? And if I just sort of made space and started waking up every day saying, I'm not depressed. I'm not depressed, that I wouldn't be depressed, and I hate that I believed it even for a little bit, that I let it in.
You should have been choosing happiness, right?
I should have been choosing happiness. I mean, look, all I have to do is just meditate on abundance and life will be abundant. I mean, the thing that gets me is like, like fucking can I swear? I don't know if you swear. So we're good
I,
swearing, right?
I swear, we can swear.
I talk to so many kids. I know it's like I never want to be like fuck this to third graders, but like it infuriates me. Tell the person of color, the woman who is working 6 jobs with her 5 kids and is trying desperately to stay alive and to feed her kids and to not let them get shot in the school where they're going. Don't tell her that if she just meditated on abundance, all that would resolve itself, right? She'd be fine and she'd have money and her kids would be safe. Like that's not reality. And to sort of imply that if you think these positive thoughts, right, and think of abundance and stop living in scarcity, that the molecules will shift around, it's just bullshit.
Yeah,
You get it?
I
You know? It was so refreshing to see your video about that. I was like, ah, yes.
yeah, it's my one of my pet peeves in life, right? There's a lot, right, and a lot of it, I understand where it comes from to an extent, right? We've had mental health, being on this side of, I will say, this side of the chair, this side of the table. There's not enough of us, right? There's not enough of us who are good at what we do. I like to think that I'm good at what I do. Um, and I get the feedback, and I always tell people, it's like my Google score is 4.6, which for a psychiatrist is
I was like,
like,
hey,
oh,
that's
who
wild.
did off the
Wow.
chart for a psychiatrist, right?
Off the chart.
Because
That's really
psychiatrists get raked on Google reviews and the Yelp and stuff. They get destroyed if they're usually like a 2 point something. I was like, oh,
oh yeah.
he must be pretty
And
good if they're like a
they're
2 point.
great. Like there are so many disgruntled people, right, who are dealing with mental health issues. So it's like they're not the most kind reviewers.
Oh yeah, so they get raked, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm a 4.6. I must be doing amazing.
That's
um,
amazing.
but that's the thing is, there's not a lot of us, right? Again, and there's been this shift, I want to say, right? Because psychiatry. So I think I got into the field. I matched in 2012, and it was one of the last years where people could get into psychiatry residency training like easily or pretty
Yeah.
okay, where it was kind of like, this is an okay-ish field, and this is like a quote unquote safety field to go into. Like if you don't have the best scores and stuff, you can get into psychiatry.
Mhm.
And a lot of times also when we have people who are, doctors in other countries and they were coming to America, and we have this terrible system for foreign medical graduates or international medical graduates where they're looked upon as second class citizens, almost, I mean literally, or not even citizens. So they're stuck getting into these positions that they may have been surgeons and radiologists in Europe or in Asia. Then they come over here and they're doing primary care. Again, nothing to say there's anything wrong with primary care psychiatry, but they're looked on as different statuses, and they're like, oh, this isn't what I want to be doing. So there's been a shift, within the field of like older people who may not have wanted to go into there. A lot of that, again, this not a glamorous, it wasn't a glamorous position, but again, like I think in 2013, 14, I think there was more of a shift as there was much more of an emphasis on lifestyle.
Huh.
Is people were able to see psychiatry is can be a great lifestyle, and we started to see fantastic, more diverse, younger, energetic people getting into the field. And I think the future of the field is
Mm.
really good,
Yeah.
but it puts the current and some of the more recent past is still, we're still in that ugly shade of what we see in TV and the media and all this stuff that's out there and the stories that are out there. And so I see that. And again, and there's not enough of us, right? There's never going to be I always say there's never in my lifetime going to be enough psychiatrists
Mhm.
that are in the field. So people have monopolized on that, right? um,
Right.
the life coaches have popped up, the diploma mill nurse practitioner schools have kind of popped up and
Yeah.
said, just get into the field and do whatever you want to do.
I feel like there's the sort of life coach world too. There's this sense of like, you can do what you do and you deserve to get paid for it, girl. So it's like these life coaches are just like, wow, we can like do well and do good. So we're taking our tidy, our like $600 for our weekend, whatever, virtual workshop, right? Abundance workshop. And in fact, are causing a lot of harm along the way. And I mean, I've seen a couple therapist friends sort of like leave their therapy practices and transition into life coaching, like no, but they act, I don't know, it's confusing, right? They feel like, well, here's where we're really going to make an impact, right?
It's hard, right? Because that we're seeing it too is that again, these people who were licensed professionals go out of it. And it was one of the things. So I made a video recently about, Dr. Sharif is my conservative, the character that I made. He's like this
Yes.
conservative Muslim psychiatrist who's, very terrible and misogynistic and, all these things. And, the latest video I made of him is kind of based on that. He's like, well, I'm done being a psychiatrist. I'm going to do a life coach. And now I have no licensure, no ethics. There's no control. I can say whatever I want to say, and there's before I'm bound by the board of psychiatry and board of ethics. I'll do whatever I want and I can say whatever I want, and this is what's happening, right? We're
Um,
losing that oversight. These people are losing that oversight, these controls, and kind of putting so much shit out into the world.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And people fall for it. Like I like to think of myself as so evolved and thinking so much about mental health. And even I fell for it for a little bit. And then it was like coming out of a trance. Like, why did I let that in my head at all? But they're very convincing. And I always have to tell people too, all the school visits that I do, like author stuff, I always have to sort of lead by being like, I'm not a mental health professional. I love when schools say, well, we want our counselor to be on hand, during and after your talk. And I'm like, great, that's fantastic. Because, it can be triggering. I never want to harm any young person. And it's sometimes hearing about my story, if that stirs anything for them, I want them to be able to talk to someone who is a trained professional and sort of move through it. And I was at 3 schools in Delaware on Monday, and I got such nice feedback after that. A lot of those students went to the school counselor and were like, we've really been thinking about this. And, we feel like that was the best thing. I love when that happens because I'm just there for an hour, right? Or like 45 minutes and I leave. I'm a writer. I go back to my cave and work on a book. But that's exactly my hope, is that after what I've shared about my experience, they go down the hall and take a left, right? And knock on the door of that school counselor, because that's the relationship, right? That's the person they can go to for weeks, months, years. Or you, right? Or they go home and they ask their parent, here's what I think I need. And could I talk to somebody? And, and then you get the phone call, right? And that's what I hope. I hope to sort of, isn't there a name for that in care? It's not like triage care, but like there's an official name that I'm losing, but it's like, I'm the bridge. I'm like the thing that if my book can like inspire them to connect with a sort of more long-term connection, community person, professional, then I've done my job. Then I'm happy.
Talk to me a little bit about we mentioned it a little bit before, but humor, right?
Mhm.
So again, that's one of the approaches that I use a lot in my videos, and I think that's something that you said you connected with, is because we want to be able to have fun and we want to be able
Yeah.
to deliver a message in a way that's palatable but also educational, and also just kind of we're still trying to instill hope and some laughs and positivity, and hopefully humor is one of the what we call, Freud would say, one of the more mature defense mechanisms out there.
Awesome.
So we put out humor. So tell me about humor in your life, and then also like in your book.
Yeah, well, it's funny. As soon as you say something like, I think I'm funny, then everyone's like, no, you're not. But but I think, I mean, I was in the improv troupe in my college, and I just think it's part of the way I see the world. I think humor just feels, it's such an important coping mechanism for me, but it's also really a lens through which I see things, either my own experience, right, or other experiences. My partner's very much this way. That's one of the things we bonded over, is sort of just, I don't know, but having this kind of wry sense of humor and just noticing things in the world that are funny, right? Or letting your own pain sometimes, finding the humor in it. It's driving in now. I had a student. I love the Q&As of these school visits, because you can so often tell they're asking about my experience, but they're asking about their own, right? And I've had a couple kids come like close to the mic, usually these are virtual, so they come up to the laptop or the mic and they say, when did your shadoom go away? And they're asking about theirs, right? You know that that's the question behind the question. But last week I had a student say, if you're in the shadoom, or if you're depressed, I can't remember what word he used, but he said, can you laugh? And I said, yeah, you totally can. That's the thing. It's like, I think there's still this kind of lingering misconception, right? That like, if you're depressed, you lie in bed for 2 weeks without like smiling or moving. But you can totally be in the midst of a depression and laugh at a funny movie. In fact, please do. I hope that you do, right? I hope that people go to your TikTok and just laugh, because it's such good medicine. And I think we have to kind of like bring that back into the conversation and realize that it really is medicine, right? Like that's going to help you. And the two aren't mutually exclusive, right? That's sort of what's confusing to me sometimes as an adult going through depressions is like, wow, I'm having a hard time, but man, I laugh so hard at, A, B, or C, right? And it's weird, but you can hold both. I mean, so much of this book for me is about chiaroscuro, which you may notice comes up in a coded form at first, but this idea that we need light and dark, right? That you can't always appreciate the light unless you have the dark, and the dark like needs the light as well. That they really coexist in all of us. And I think for me, if I'm writing a book, especially a book for young people, right, that has some darkness in it, I have to bring up my game and balance it out with light. I have to. I'm not willing to just write this like downer of a book. I want you to be laughing. A friend read it recently and she said, I laugh out loud almost every page. And that was like the best feedback I've gotten, because I really want kids to feel joy reading it. I want adults to feel joy reading it. There's a Keanu Reeves joke in this book that no child is going to get, I'm pretty sure. But that joke is for the adults reading,
Awesome. We need that. We always need to have like, I got a couple, a few young kids, 3 kids, and we're going through all the kiddo movies again, right? And then you're watching them through a totally different lens, and you're like, oh, these jokes, right? And you're like, all
Right.
the jokes that you're like, I didn't get 20 years ago, 15 years ago,
Right.
whatever it is, that like now you're getting. So
And I think, yeah, it's like Pixar does that so well. I remember seeing, I guess Inside Out. I mean, I was fully an adult when that movie came out a few years ago. I found that movie so moving because that when everything goes sort of dark, when like all of her personality, like that was how my depression felt at her age. I think she's 11, and I just started crying watching that movie. It was so moving to me. But it's also hilarious, right? I mean, Amy Poehler's like the whole conceit is so fun. It's such a romp. There are moments in the when they're going through like the abstract art thing or whatever that still just kill me. I think they're so funny. So to be able to kind of hold those two things, and to always, I think for me as a writer, I'm always sort of calibrating, being like, okay, did this get a little too, okay, then I need to balance it out. Well, this next scene then needs to be a little sillier or funnier. I'm always kind of calibrating to make sure that I have a balance, right? And that there is room for moving moments or, harder moments, harder epiphanies, but then a silly joke or, a funny whatever. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of my inspiration for my humor was from um Monty Python and like the PBS kind of stuff. That was the stuff. My dad. I always poke fun of my poor dad in my
I was gonna
videos.
say, I've met your dad, sort of. I've met your dad on TikTok. It's amazing.
I always say he's a caricature of who he is, but there's definitely stuff that's like based in reality. Those things that are there, which I think anybody who does any of this stuff will pull on their own life. And I always tell the story. I was like, he and when we were in 7th grade, 8th grade, cut the cable because he was like, there's information overload, right? So it's too much. So we were stuck with like, the basic channels, the 5, 6 channels that were there at the time. So, PBS formed a lot of, that humor that was there. Monty Python formed a lot of that humor for me. So that dry British kind of humor and
Yeah.
then the elements of slapstick kind of that pop up in there that are there. What formed your humor? Where did yours kind of come from? What's some of the inspiration for that?
That's a good question. I mean, so much of mine is wordy, right? I mean, so much of everything that I do is wordy. I think my Instagram little blurb is wordy, nerdy, a little absurdy. And that feels like accurate, really probably the most accurate description of myself I've ever come up with. Because I think there's there's a lot of wordplay, right? And in Zia, this book was like, I've never been able to dump so much of my own joyous playfulness with words into this book, because the irony of Zia's story is that she's trying to find the word for this thing, but she loves words. She loves coming up with words. She's always sort of pressing two words together and making a new word, which is a portmanteau, but she calls it a short manteau, like pressing two short men into a tall one. So it's that sort of thing. It's just like this kind of playfulness with language and some sort of situational humor, I think. Yeah, I don't do so much slapsticky either. I think like wit, I would say, has always been what is attracted to me. And I think I got that from my mom. I think she has a really similar sense of humor and also very wordy, very language based. I'm trying to think, like, what was I watching as a kid? Was I watching any movies as a kid? We didn't have a TV for a long time. My mom was sort of opposed to it. And then I broke my leg and then we had a TV because I was watching a lot of it. But I think like Yeah, I don't know. That's such a good question. I'll have to think about that. What were my sort of early humor? I mean, honestly, I Love Lucy was my obsession from like 10 to 14. But I think that kind of zaniness, I hit that every once in a while, maybe like it's sort of scene building to a crescendo. But I think it's different than the way that the humor runs through my books now.
So you were originally based out of Texas, and Texas is going through is popping up in the news for multiple various different reasons. I'm in Virginia. Virginia was recently popping up, in Loudoun County was I was actually in Texas. I was visiting my friend Zia. I think I messaged you. So my
Oh, yeah,
friend,
Zia,
yeah,
Zia, the large muscular man.
Zia again, who is this, yeah, large muscular psychiatrist, and we were hanging out together at WrestleMania doing manly stuff. And then so when you when when you sent over the book and the message and everything, I was like, oh, Zia, the young the middle school girl with depression who's going through some stuff. I was like, ah, yes, they fit very well in my life. Um, so, but what was it? Oh yeah, so he's in Dallas, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
And
that's where I'm from, Dallas.
and then I was there and we were talking, and he was asking me about like the Loudoun County stuff, like in regards to like the lack, not using pronouns, and the misgendering that was going on, and the teacher that this guy that and then like how it changed like the governor race and the politics kind of going on. And now there's more stuff. I was unfortunately like was late night on Twitter for whatever reason last night, and I got sucked into like the the book controversy about, there was a book that just recently came out that I think it was called Gender. I can't remember the name of it. It's like some book about gender stuff, right?
Yeah.
And LGBTQ stuff. And they're like, oh my God, this is the filth and the depravity that's in our high schools and middle schools, and we have to ban these books. And you're an author and you're bringing up some stuff, right? But at the same time, like, how do you feel, or what are your thoughts on that? Because I was getting into this arguments, and of course you can't reason with these people, right? You can't have a conversation, especially on Twitter, where there's like limitations, character limitations, stuff.
Right.
you know s- Talk to me your thoughts about that, especially I'm doing a lot of stuff in video media and stuff, and that's where I'm seeing stuff. And books are the classic old school stuff that lives forever, but it's a different media. But again, they're coming under fire and banning books and all these things.
Yeah, it's been such a big discussion, such a big conversation in the book community, the book bans this year, and a lot of really cool initiatives to counter them. I think it's the New York Public Library, right, who like gave free access to a lot of these banned books, right, especially books with queer and LGBT characters, and God forbid we embrace people who are gay. Wow. I was reading. There's so much good stuff on. I'm not on Twitter, but I feel like people are always posting on Instagram, tweets, and there's just so much good stuff that's like, why do you, let's take Texas example. Why do you, like, white lady from Texas, not think that by playing all your Disney movies, you're indoctrinating your kid into heterosexuality? Like, you know what I mean? Like this sense of like, oh, we're poisoning the minds. Well, you're poisoning them with your hetero shit. Like, right? Like you're tilting your kids in the direction you want, right? Like, so anyway, I think a lot about it. I mean, I think as a writer, as an author, sometimes I feel helpless in the sense that I'm not an activist, and I wouldn't be a good sort of like marching. It's like I go to marches and I'm an introvert, and I really have a lot of anxiety around a lot of people. So I feel like a shitty activist, right? So I feel like all the thing I feel like I can do best is to have better rep in my books. There's a trans character toward the end of Zia, only in one scene, but it's a pretty pivotal scene. And I worked a lot. I had a trans sensitivity reader, a trans woman, work with me on it. And, in an earlier draft, I dead named the character to sort of be like, oh, but, working with this woman, working with my reader, it was like, oh yeah, I can't do that. Right. Like, here's a better way to do it. So that sort of stuff I spend a lot of time thinking about. And I think as a writer, as an author, it's really incumbent on you to bring in the authenticity and sensitivity readers. One of the other main character in Zia is a Vietnamese American girl. And so we brought in a Vietnamese American reader to really, check in with me and like, what did I get wrong and what did I get right? And it's so helpful. I mean, every single thing she said was exactly right. Right. Even things like that seem so innocuous. Like I said something about her, Alice's it was silky hair or something, right? And she was sort of like, I appreciate that this is like a positive adjective, but here's the entire history of like dainty feminine Asian women, right? And like the kind of fetishization and the exoticization. That sort of stuff is like, as you know, garden variety white girl, I just don't see it. And so then you have to have people who see it, who can check you, right? And be like, oh, had you thought about this? And every time I'm like, I hadn't, but I will now. You know, it's that sort of stuff. I think, you know, and obviously I am a white cis straight woman. It's like I do have a lot of bias or sort of unexamined bias, right? And I have a lot of privilege. So I have to bring other people in to help me check my privilege, right? And to just show me things that I don't see a lot of the time. I think like that, you know, I wonder if any of my books will ever get banned. I mean, certainly my trilogy, my young adult trilogy
Hopefully,
is
hopefully not.
extremely queer. Like most of the characters are somewhere on the LGBT spectrum. But yeah, do we want now? It's like it's almost like becoming a badge of honor to be a banned book because and so many people will rise up and be like this, right? Like which is really cool to see. It's been cool to see the book community kind of rally and come against this movement of you know weird hate and bigotry and censorship and all of that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, are there fixes? I think again, vehicles like Twitter and Instagram, right, connect more people. So there's more outrage. I mean, there's more chance to fight back, right? There are more indie bookstores and libraries saying, well, here's what we're going to do. And I think that's hopeful. That gives me hope.
You brought up like the whole badge of honor now, and I think it's this kind of argument that we see. People are like, we're going to ban this book and we're going to get it off the out of the libraries and stuff. And I was like, well, what do you think is going to happen then? You've
Yeah.
celebrated this book that may have, I was like, first of all, I was like, kids don't always go to the library, right? I was like, they're not usually in the library. But now you've kind of put this book out there and said,
Right.
this is a banned book that you can't read. And it's
Right.
like, what did
Everybody wants to read it now.
well, you want to read it? Now you're like, what do I want to? I want to get this book. Where can I get
What's
it?
the Star Wars? What isn't Obi-Wan Kenobi like? If you strike me down, or wait, isn't Darth Vader like, if you strike me down, I will become more
Obi-Wan, yeah,
powerful than you
yeah,
ever imagined, right? And it's like that is sort of, it's so cool to see like all these like angry white parents in Texas being like, oh, this book had a gay character, and that like in fact then the book gets so much love and support and is totally read. You know, I see now at a lot of bookstores because I've been going to a lot of stores for the book tour. So many now have a table at the front that's like the banned book table. And how cool, like, of course kids are gonna go to that table, right? Exactly. So it's so funny. These like angry, bigoted people are prejudiced people, right? Are absolutely getting those books to be more read by the very children they're trying to protect.
yeah. And it's of course, I have to bring in sneakers in there, but like, it's the story of Michael Jordan's first signature shoe. Which the story, the myth is that the NBA banned it because it was black and red, and then because they're like, well, you can't wear black sneakers or colored sneakers. And it just became this like urban legend, and everyone was like,
Yeah.
this is why that black and red colorway of the Jordan ones became so popular. And Nike, of course, being the marketing geniuses that they
Yeah.
are, was like, this is the band shoe, this is the band colorway. And this is again why nowadays, like these shoes, like vintage Jordans from 1985, 84, when they came out, go for tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Because they're the
Yeah.
band shoes.
Band shoe,
And
right?
even, again, and part of the argument like that I was getting into with like the people last night, I was like, well, okay, so we're banning these books. But I was like, guess what? There's the internet. And I was
Right.
like,
Hello.
and you're also like, they're like, well, don't you think about parental controls? It's like, yeah, but people go around parental controls all the time. And I
Yeah.
was like, somebody can download a copy of a book and send it out to the group, the class email, and everybody has the book, and it's there, and it's it's you're not getting rid of the problem, quote unquote, by banning the book. And at the same time, like again, the internet has all this other stuff that's out there, right? So it's all the potential dangers and stuff and problems that are out there. And it's like we'd rather have people learn about this from a positive, healthy kind of a message or an avenue versus an unfiltered kind of world that's out there, and
Yeah,
kind of
exactly. Right,
just
and, like, most authors are, like, trying to craft pretty affirming messages, right, for young people. But isn't it just nuts? It's like we ban books, we ban these little flimsy things, paper and words, but we don't ban assault rifles, right? It's like, what it's just so messed up. It's just like the country has such a sickness, and like and focuses on I feel like I was just talking with my best friend about how American exceptionalism is anything but. We managed to get so much wrong, in fact, so much wrong.
It's one of those things that like it comes down to money ultimately, right? And who's throwing money here, who's getting money and
Yeah,
all that stuff. And always it's one of the things that I always kind of say is that kids don't matter in politicians' views because they
right.
don't vote.
I know.
Uh,
Yeah,
they don't get to vote,
and they
and
don't spend, right? They don't. They're
they
not.
don't
Yeah,
lobby, they can't spend money, and they can't do that stuff. So, in all intents and purposes, kids don't matter,
yeah,
and they're
right.
just
Yeah, exactly. In a capitalist society, they don't.
yeah.
They don't. There's no way. I mean, you can make profit from kids, of course, to their parents, but like ultimately, yeah, it's still going through someone else. They themselves have no worth in a capitalist system, right?
What have been so you've been going through the tours and you're promoting the book a little bit. Um, what have been some of like you talked about it, like some of the good things, some of the feedback that you're getting from the students and the counselors, etc. What have been some other kind of like unexpected per se things or other things that you noticed that was like, oh, I wasn't expecting this, or other kind of like feedback that you've gotten that you've really been like, this is important.
Yeah, I wish I'd been writing it down because it's been such a blur. I mean, today is my last school visit. It's the 21st school that I've spoken at in 4 weeks. And sometimes I
Oh
go
wow.
to school 2 or 3 times. Yeah, so and then I've had library events and then bookstore. So I'm clocking in about 40 events in the last 4 weeks. So of course they're all blurring. But there are a few that really stand out. I went to a big high school. It was 8th grade and in Western New York in a really small town. And it was a big auditorium of people and 8th graders, 7th and 8th graders, which is almost a little too old for Zia, or so we're told, right? Publishers like, well, no, 8th graders probably not going to be into reading this story about an 11-year-old. And nobody bought books, which you never know at like an auditorium event. It's like, okay, maybe they will, maybe, but they didn't. So I was like, whatever, it's fine. But it was a good group. They really were listening. I really felt like I had them and they were listening and responding. The next day at a bookstore event, parents came in, a woman and a man, and they said, our son is in 8th grade. He has no friends. He's dealing with major anxiety. He's gay and he's not out. He feels so alone. And your talk really meant something to him. And he sent us in here today to buy your book. So it's like, and it was just so funny. It was so great, right? Because publishing would be like a 13-year-old boy, 14-year-old boy, like that's not who you're writing for. But like something in him was tilting toward the story, right? And feeling less alone. And so sent his parents to buy the book, and that I always say if with every talk that I give or every school visit, if one person in that room, right? If one person in that auditorium of 200 kids needed to hear it and like will get something from the book and feel less alone, then it's worth it. Really. If one person, then like I'm glad I went. So that was so cool because you often don't know if there's the one person, right? But it's like that there was my one, right? And I've thought of him so often. And then there's other stuff. I mean, for a lot of these workshops, I do or a lot of these visits, I do writing workshops. Depending on the time we have, if it's a shorter block, like 30 minutes, there's really not enough time to do that. But a lot of these schools have said yes to a writing workshop. And so I ask the question, of course, which so much of Zia is based on, if you could erase one word, what would you erase? And then they write about it for a little bit. And I tell them they can write anything, a poem, a short story, science fiction, maybe 200 years in the future without this word can be funny. I had a couple kids write haikus and limericks yesterday, which was fun. And it is so amazing to see what kids say and what words they choose. And war and conflict have come up a lot right now, right, for obvious reasons. Racism comes up a lot, sexism comes up a good bit. We sometimes, I feel like that always engenders a conversation of me saying, here are the words that as I was writing this book, was like, why wouldn't Zia erase racism, sexism, ableism, Islamophobia, transphobia, right? Like all the isms and phobias. Why wouldn't she erase COVID? That was actually a conversation I had with my editor. I was like, why wouldn't my editor was like, we're not gonna have COVID in the dictionary. So it's so interesting to get to hear what these kids erase. And then the the things that they read are just so profound and beautiful and honest. I mean, the thing that gets me is that these kids have no idea who I am, right? I just like beamed into their screen and they get up there and they like read these stories that just are incredible. They're incredible. And it blows me away every time. And the kind of insight that they have, so many of them, even really young ones, have the ability to hold both the benefits and the costs of erasing their word. And the best example is I did a couple school visits at a school in Edmonton in Canada, and a really large immigrant population at this school, and incredible. The writing was so good, and they had a lot of war, violence, conflict, a lot of words that they'd lived through those things. And one boy got up and read the most beautiful piece, and the word he chose was slavery. And slavery had been a part of his family history. And
Wow.
a part of this piece, though, I'm going to get choked up talking about it, was that he realized that if he erased that word, that the language that the slaves in Haiti had created would be gone. And that was a part of his family's culture, that language. And so this is an 11-year-old, to be able to write this piece about this horrible thing that like it should absolutely be erased from the world, right? But that he realized if he were to erase it, that a part of his history and his culture and language and his family, right, would also be erased. I mean, that kind of stuff. I get off of those Zoom calls sometimes and I just cry, or I just walk around my house being like, the young people in this world, right? The sort of insight and depth that they have and the suffering that they have gone through, and are going through, certainly this mental health crisis. It moves me deeply, and it's very humbling. I'm like, are they getting some of these writing workshops? I think I'm getting like I feel sort of changed every time. Young minds are incredible. They're incredible.
And I think that's like really important. I think, one of the reasons that I was like, yeah, let's link up and talk, was because, you had written this letter to me in a way, or this kind of note, that hit me a bit, right? It was like, oh my God, it hit me in the feels. I joked, I was like, you got a tear out of me, almost got a tear out of me.
I almost got a tear.
Almost got a tear, almost, we're getting there. But that was the reality of it, right? Is that for people who put stuff out there, in any way, shape, or form, right? And I always say it's like when I gave a talk on being a creator recently, and I was like, I'm not really a creator, but I was like, part of it was like we're all creators in some way, right? We all create something, we all put something out there. That feedback that we get, or that aspect of like somebody saying, hey, I saw your video, I read your book, I saw your painting, I saw, I read your art, whatever, right? Whatever it is, right? And it meant something to me.
Yeah.
It had an impact on me, and it made me or inspired me to do something. It's like when it gets you, right? It's when it really hits you and you're like, I've done something. You're like, you feel like validation, right? Again, like what you're saying is you feel like, I think we all have some element of like imposter syndrome to an extent of like, am I doing this, or does this mean something? Like, what's my legacy, and blah, blah, blah. And, you get these messages here and there and you're like, well, damn, okay. It is
Yeah.
something. It's
Right.
something.
It keeps me going. And I think, it's certainly as a writer too of books, like the transaction of a person reading a book is solitary, right? Like whatever you do, it's solitary. And most people don't love a book so much that they track down their author more these days, because you can find people on social media, right? But still, it's ultimately a solitary act. So I assume that the vast majority of people who read my books, I'll never hear from them, right? So when I do, or when I do get feedback, right, from these school visits, it's such a gift, because right, it's like we just usually most of our lives spent creating, we have no idea if it means anything to other people, right? If it's landing at all, if it's helping people. So I so appreciate when people reach out to me, and it is why I wanted to reach out to you, right? I feel like, because now that I know a bit of what it's like to just have no idea and to feel like an imposter a lot of the time, I really do try to reach out to creators and even authors, right? People whose work I've read and I've really connected with it. I try to find them and tell them, because I know how much it means, right? We know it's really special. It's really special.
Yeah. And absolutely. I think like, especially when we're in this world where it's, it's been cheapened almost, right? Like creation, we take this stuff for granted and all these things. And I've gotten a little bit into the NFT. No, I'm not trying to be like an NFT bro, right? I've gotten a little bit into the NFT world a bit, just but I take it from that different view of I like finding, the one for one pieces, right? I
Mhm.
like to find the people who are putting, a lot of female artists, and I like to be able to kind of send a message and be
Mhm.
like, yo, this, I saw your artwork, and I bought this because I wanted to send appreciation in some way,
Yeah.
form. And you get that feedback that, like, hear back from them, they're like, thanks, it means a lot. And again, I
Yeah.
always say that people is like, say thank you. And you don't know how much it means when you say thank you to the people that are out there. Like, we, in my office, in my other room, we have like when we have thank you cards, we keep all the thank you cards, right?
Yeah.
We have those things, and it's just it means a lot to us. It
Yeah.
validates all of us when we get some praise, or not necessarily praise, but just appreciation. And
Appreciation, yeah, yeah. Like occasionally, classrooms will all send me letter, like they'll, the kids will make handmade letters or whatever. And I mean, I just keep those forever. I mean, I'll never get rid of those, right? There was a kid who made a diorama. This was my first book, the YA fantasy trilogy, but he made a diorama for a school project of like my characters, and I was just like, I'm retiring because you know what I mean? When a kid makes a diorama like for a school project from your book, you're done. You're never going to get any higher than that. Like, stop writing immediately.
oh yeah, yeah, that's the pinnacle. So you're good.
Well, yeah,
All
exactly.
right. I think we got to be respectful of your time. So tell us about where we can find your book, and give us the sell.
So, okay, so Zia Erases the World. Right behind me in this large. Someone said, "Yay, here we go." Mwah, mwah. Someone, one of the students in a visit was like, "Here, it's a better visual if I give you more of the shelf." She was like, "Did you write all the books on that shelf?" I said, "No, I did not. I wish I did, but I didn't." So you can buy Zia at any bookstore. It should be. We always say, if you can go to your indie bookstore, we like that, right? Go right past that banned books table at the front and just keep going. So it'll be in the middle grade section, in the children's section, and should be at any bookstores. You can also, order online, maybe at barnesandnoble.com or indiebound.com. So you should be able to find it anywhere. And also, if people are librarians or teachers or working at nonprofits, reach out to me because I love doing these visits. I love doing writing workshops, and we can always talk about a sort of hybrid of how those work. But it's my favorite part of the gig, honestly, is getting to connect with kids. So I'm very open to that, which is making me realize that my website needs to be updated. But yeah, basically, find me on Instagram, I would say, is the best place that I am. And my handle is Speak Breely, like speak freely, but Breely. And I love feedback from readers and people like you. So yeah, I hope the book, I hope the book, I hope the book makes kids feel less alone. That's my great hope, that they feel seen and something in Zia's story resonates, or Alice, the other character, and that it encourages them to reach out for help in whatever way feels right to them, to find the words to seek out help and get it. That's my great hope.